This week on 0 Days Since Nonsense, we shipped it. Is it secure? We'll fix that later. Does the logging actually tell us what happened when something breaks? Later. Did anybody test whether one customer can see another customer's data? Okay, now you're just being negative. There's this idea in tech that you can build something fast, get it into production, and then circle back to security once everything calms down, which is adorable, because production is famously where things calm down. Build now, secure later sounds fast because the bill hasn't arrived yet. The problem is that security work you skip before launch usually doesn't disappear. It gets more expensive, more disruptive, and way harder to change once real customers start depending on the thing. That's what I mean when I say tech debt eventually collects interest. And security debt is worse than normal tech debt because somebody else can potentially use it against you. Now, technical debt is a normal part of building software. Sometimes you take a shortcut because shipping matters more than making everything perfect. Maybe the code's ugly. Maybe one piece needs to be cleaned up later. That's not automatically bad. The problem is when the shortcut affects security. A messy function might annoy the developer, but a bad authorization decision might let the wrong customer see data they should have never had access to. And that's a very different kind of debt. Vericode's 2026 State of Software Security data found 82% of organizations had security debt, and on top of that, 60% of those had critical security debt. And Vericode defines security debt as security flaws that stay unresolved for at least a year after they're discovered. So this isn't some weird edge case. A lot of companies are carrying old security problems while continuing to build new things on top of them, and attackers don't care that the fix is sitting in Jira. The biggest mistake with Secure It Later is treating security like a decoration. Build the app, launch the app, then security can come afterward and sprinkle MFA and encryption on top. Unfortunately, some security decisions have to be part of the structure. Things like how users authenticate, what users are allowed to access, where secrets are stored, and what gets logged are decisions that shape the application. If you get them wrong early, fixing them later can mean changing the way the whole system works. And that's why guidance like CISA's Secure by Design pushes security into the architecture and development process instead of treating it like a final inspection. You're not avoiding the work, you're deciding when you want to pay for it. And production has terrible interest rates. Let's use one example. A company needs a customer portal. Customers should be able to log in, view invoices, and download documents. Leadership wants it quickly because customers have been asking for it. That part's reasonable. The team builds it, the demo works, a test account logs in, the invoice opens, everybody's happy, and we ship it. But nobody really tested whether changing an account identifier could let one customer request another customer's invoice. The app still works. That's the problem. The feature can work perfectly while the access control underneath is wrong. Then the portal gets thousands of users, and now the thing that would have been much easier to fix before launch is tied to production data, real accounts, and existing workflows. And at that point, even a straightforward security fix feels dangerous because changing it could break something customers depend on. That shortcut didn't disappear, it became infrastructure, and now everybody's scared to touch it. And this matters because exploitable vulnerabilities are still a huge part of how breaches happen. Verizon's 2026 Data Breach Investigations report found that vulnerability exploitation accounted for 31% of the breaches in its dataset. Now, that does not mean that 31 breaches happened because somebody rushed insecure code into production. That'd be overstating the data. But what it does mean is that exploitable weaknesses are one of the biggest ways attackers are getting initial access. And fixing known problems isn't exactly going great either. The same Verizon report found that only 26% of critical vulnerabilities in CISA's known exploited vulnerability catalog were fully remediated by organizations in 2025. And the median of that resolution has increased to 43 days. So companies already have more security work than they can comfortably get through. If your development process keeps intentionally adding more debt to that pile, eventually the pile is going to start winning. The backlog isn't just paperwork. Some of those tickets represent real ways into the environment. Tech has an incredible relationship with the word temporary. Temporary means we're definitely fixing this later. And then 3 years pass. The person who built the workaround leaves. Nobody remembers why it exists. Something important now depends on it, and suddenly removing it feels more dangerous than leaving it alone. And that's how security debt compounds. The original shortcut became part of the normal architecture. The new features get built around it. Eventually security says, we really need to replace this, and the business says, we can't, that might break production. Which is fair. But we've now arrived at the exact situation we've been trying to avoid. The risk isn't just that the original decision was bad, it's that time made the decision harder to undo. A security problem doesn't just sit still. Sometimes the system grows around it. A weak permission model gets reused. A bad deployment pattern becomes standard. A vulnerable component gets buried deeper into the product. Now one fix can affect multiple parts of the application. Vericode's 2025 research found that the average time to fix security flaws had increased 47% since 2020. That doesn't mean developers stopped caring. Modern applications are complicated. Teams are moving quick. There are more dependencies, more cloud services, and more things connected together than there used to be. And that's exactly why pushing security to later doesn't scale. I also don't want this to turn into developers should move slowly and security should approve every button. No. Companies have to ship things. A startup that spends 9 months threat modeling a basic landing page probably has a different problem. The goal isn't perfect security. Perfect security does not exist. The goal is to stop treating obvious security fundamentals like optional polish. Before production, there should be a few things you refuse to hand wave away. For example, authentication and authorization need to make sense. Secrets shouldn't live in places they obviously don't belong. Known critical issues need an actual decision, and logging needs to be useful enough to investigate a problem. That's not asking for perfection. That's asking for a floor. And this is where companies get security wrong in both directions. One extreme is ship everything, we'll secure it eventually. The other extreme is nothing moves until security approves every tiny change. And neither one of these works well. Security is most useful when it becomes part of the normal development process. Automate the boring checks, catch common mistakes while the code is being built, and make the dangerous stuff obvious before launch. That can include things like dependency scanning, secret scanning, static analysis, and access control testing. The point isn't to make developers fill out 40 forms. The point is to catch a bad decision while it's still cheap to change. Security shouldn't be a giant toll booth at the end of the highway. It should be guardrails along the road. And now that we've finished calculating the interest on security debt, it's time for this week's recurring segment, Things Security Says. First, security needs to be involved before launch. What everyone hears is, security would like to delay the project until the sun explodes. What security actually means is, it's easier to change the design before thousands of customers depend on it. Next, we need a remediation plan. What everyone hears is, security says no. What security actually means is, if we're choosing a shortcut, can we at least decide who's fixing it and when? And finally, this one needs to be fixed before production. What everyone hears is, security found another scanner alert. What security actually means is, this lets one customer see another customer's data. Maybe let's deal with that before launch. Security isn't trying to stop the release. We're trying to stop the release from becoming an incident response exercise without branding. Okay, but seriously, the answer isn't never take shortcuts. That's not realistic. The answer is to know which shortcuts are safe to carry and which ones can turn into actual security problems. If you knowingly accept a security issue to hit a deadline, don't just throw it in the backlog called later. Give it an owner, a priority, and a real date to remediate. Because we'll come back to it is not a remediation plan. Also, fix the issues while the context is still fresh. The developer who just built the feature understands it now. 6 months from later, the same fix may require somebody else to spend 2 days figuring out why the code works the way it does. And when you can automate checks, automate them. The earlier a problem is found, the more options you usually have for fixing it without breaking everything around it. That's what secure development looks like. Not security showing up at the end and yelling no. Not developers just shipping whatever they want and hoping nobody notices. Just security becoming part of how the thing gets built. The key takeaways for this episode are technical debt is part of building software. Sometimes the right business decision is to take a shortcut. But security debt has one major difference. Somebody else can potentially use it against you. The goal isn't to make every application perfect before it ships. It's to stop knowingly creating security problems that become harder to fix every day they survive. Move fast, ship things, just remember that later eventually shows up. And sometimes it brings an incident response team with it. Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of 0 Days Since Nonsense. For this week's audience question, what's the most ridiculous temporary technical workaround you've seen become permanent? Leave your answer in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video, and I hope you have a wonderful day.